Hi guys, that's quite a crowd. So, yeah, I mean, maybe most of you are singles. I don't know what it is. That must be, you know. It just it's funny because I came across that topic speaking with one of my friends over there during a last audio I made actually here at Strand, and we were mentioning some potential differences between the conception of friendship in France and the conception of friendship in the US, like American way of friending, so to say. And so that actually took me to think about the topic a little bit more, and then David came along with this date, oh, that's kind of close to Valentine's Day. That's when I was like, okay, so I'm gonna just sing the praises of friendship with you guys, and fuck love. This is so much better. And while doing my research, I just noticed that. Took me a bit by surprise. A lot of differences that we think about, pointing out when we think about love on the one hand and friendship on the other, actually seem to be irrelevant or deserve to be more closely considered. And that's what we're going to be trying to do today. So basically, we all know, obviously, that friends play a crucial role in our emotional balance, but also in the construction of our moral character. So that's something I'm going to try to emphasize on tonight. Most philosophers, as you might know, have extremely demanding conceptions of friendship. So we're going to try to see how they approach the topic, how they try to define friendship, which type of criteria or which type of features they actually associate with what friendship is or should be. Okay, and this will be done not only in a descriptive way, I would say, but also in a normative way, namely, what do friends ought to be, basically, to each other, okay? So not only a definitional type of work, but also, let's see what are the functions, maybe, or the tasks of friendship, so to say. So, basically, the question that we're gonna, circle around are the following. First of all, are there any characteristics that exclusively define true friendship? How can I assess whether a friendship is good, real, or genuine? What makes friendship worthwhile, really, is also a question we should ask ourselves. Why should I invest my energy, my time, my resources in a friend? And so we're not going to think only about what defines friendship, but how do our friendships define us as well? So the first question I want you to think about very quickly by talking to the person next to you just for a few minutes is, what are the similarities or the differences between romantic relationships on the one hand and friendships on the other? So would you kindly just take a few moments to discuss that among yourselves, and we'll discuss about it together. All right, guys. So let's see what you come up with. So first of all, I think that, some differences are pretty obvious. Let's try to see what you come up with. What would be the main differences between friendship on the one hand and romantic love on the other? Go ahead. Anyone? One comes, in mind pretty quickly. Come on, guys. Obviously, it's basically one main difference, but what else?
I just wanted to complicate that one, because we were talking about, you can have a hookup buddy you're not actually that emotionally connected to, and you can have a friend you're much more connected to you don't sleep with, and I wonder if that ends up evening it out.
This is true, absolutely. So first of all, the frontiers between, romantic love on the one hand and friendship on the other are pretty blurry. And it's possible not only because they share some common features, which I think we're gonna, get to see together, but also because you can be both. So this sexual attraction thing doesn't exclude the possibility of a friendship with the very same person. That's true, absolutely. But what I think that we can come around one main difference though. Yes?
The idea of exclusivity and commitment.
Exclusive and commitment being part of loving relationship or friendships?
Right, so with your friends, you're not only a friend, right? You can't see other friends.
You mean that there is a relative plurality about friends that there is not in love relationships? But that also can be put into question, you see? Like how many people would here say like, oh, you know, polyamorous love or whatever, we could speak about that, for instance. So exclusivity is not really actually a real criteria to differentiate between the two. And you said exclusivity and commitment. Same here. I think in friendship there is kind of a pact. There is kind of a commitment that takes place, actually a pretty big one. We're going to discuss about that. And in love as well. Go ahead.
Marriage is only, you cannot, well, you can only put marriage into a loving relationship.
You don't have the equivalent of marriage for friendship. This is true. Fair enough. On a legal perspective, that's for sure. And that might reveal some symbolics also. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say, to that, I like what you said, where we are changing our definition of relationship to incorporate polyamorous relationships. But no matter what, in a romantic relationship, there's still the path you're supposed to follow. There's a lot more expectations. The expectations can be different, but there's still that clear, you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do that. It could be polyamorous, it could be monogamous, whatever. But in a friendship, it feels a lot less like, I don't know, what are the stages of a friendship?
Yeah, okay, so there are more like social constraints around actual love, romantic relationship than there is around friendship, which has more of a flexibility to it. Yes, that might be true. But there is like one specific differentiating feature here. Yeah? The degree to which you might rely on each other. Huh. I'm sure some people could question that still. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Chemistry, we come back to that. That comes to like the sexual attraction type of thing. And I'm going to argue that there can be actually a type of sensuality involved into friendship as well. Not only on like, you know, the argument is not to say anymore that there can be like, you know, you can have sex with your friend, etc. But more like purely, you know, friendship without sexual attraction. There is a type of intimacy as well in friendship that we're going to discuss. What else?
The way that you love the person, like loving dearly versus loving deeply.
Loving dearly versus loving deeply. Huh. It sounds great, you know, but you know, it's just like catchy sentence, but I'm not sure it. I mean, there is really one thing. Yes.
I was going to say, I'm not a scientist at all, but there's like some biological element to romance where when you are in love or have romantic feelings, you have some type of like chemical reaction as opposed to friendship.
So that comes back to this remark, which is, I mean, I agree to a certain extent with you, and this is true. But maybe one feature that you didn't think about is just the reciprocity. I mean, you cannot say, hey, I'm your friend, without having the other saying like the same thing. Like you cannot be the friend of somebody while the other doesn't consider you being also their friends. Whereas love, you know, or your romantic relationship or sexual attraction or, you know, everything that's concerned with what we're going to call eros can be actually just one-sided. So that's like, I would say, the main difference. And from all the other like features you've been actually pointing out, I can always find some way to just like question it. So the main differences that most philosophers have been speaking about, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to sing the praises of friendship tonight, is the fact that friendship is actually more serene or more safer, I would say. And that's a thesis that's defended notably by Epicurus, that you might have heard of, very famous philosopher of the antiquity, founder of what we call the Hedonist Movement, thinking about pleasure as like the main thing we should, you know, strive for, basically. And he says one of the things wisdom acquires for the blessedness of life as a whole, far the greatest is the possession of friendship. And he puts friendship way above romantic relationships, saying that you don't have like this kind of passionate desire of possession where the sex is involved, the yearning for the physical union that can blind you as well, etc., that you have in romantic relationships. So that's one distinction that has been pointing out, like this kind of serenity that friendships comes around. But even that, I thought about it and I'm like, it's not that simple, again. So we'll go back to that, but I think actually friendship is demanding also. So serenity to a certain extent, but definitely not just, you know, easy for that matter. So all the similarities you've been pointing out, like I'm sure you could add up, a relative similarity of interest, for instance. That's, one feature of friendship for sure. Loyalty, that's one feature of friendship, but that we can also find in love relationships. Trust, empathy, like the idea that friendship and love are life-enhancing in a way, like the pleasure of sharing activities. So every time, like you try to come around with to come with like one specific feature of friendship, you actually can say, well, you find that in love as well. Okay? So again, what is there? Caring about someone for his or her own sake, involving both sympathy and actions on the friend's behalf. That's one thing that's very important as well. Intimacy, in the sense maybe more of a psychological identification in the case of friendship. Nonetheless, it's there, but also because of like kind of a mutual self-disclosure, maybe, that happens with friendship, where basically you create this bond of trust, essential to friendship, where we make ourselves kind of vulnerable to each other, but that's also very, similar in a love relationship. Now, if we speak about relative exclusivity as well, I think that, so there is probably a relative plurality in friendship that is not so much expected in a love relationship, where, we're kind of like expecting our norms, social norms are expecting us to be more, aiming at uniqueness, basically. But we could argue that jealousy also exists in friendship, actually. It's when you're just looking for the attention of your friend, and you notice that this friend is actually befriending somebody else. And it's interesting to look at children, how they actually build friendship, at school, etc. And the jealousy is actually extremely important at that moment, which is like the most innocent way of building friendship, but very important, I think also something we don't mention often, I think we could, the same way we can fall in love, we also fall in friendship. Sometimes, don't we? There are moments really where you just look at, you're like, guy, this man sounds awesome. I just want to, there is some kind of like attraction going on, really, even if it's not sexual at first. There is really something that like kind of leads you towards this person, and you want to talk to them, you want to discover more. There is a curiosity that grows, etc. So I think we can fall in friendship. And then when we sustain friendship, and that takes me back to what you said about like attraction or the sensuality of it, there is a physical proximity that also develops. And there is a tenderness also involved, I would say, in friendship that can be important to certain friendships. And even like, I don't know if you have this expression in English, guys, but in French we say, I can't smell that person, when you really cannot have like kind of a relationship with this person, even like a friendly relationship with them. So when you have a friend, you need to be able to smell them, to appreciate, like to even touch them. You touch your friend, you smell them, you just like, there is a sensuality to, not sensuality obligatory in the sexual meaning, but a sensuality that involves literally our senses, that is, has to do with this physical proximity I was just talking about. So we are sometimes attracted to our friend independently from the supposed objective qualities of a friend. We also sustain friendship and romantic relationships when there is a history of concern for each other. So there is also like a diachronical aspect of friendship. It's not only what is a friend right now, but how friendship builds itself through time. So that's also a huge component. I'm sure you guys have some friends where you actually would be unable to tell why they still are your friends, except for the fact that you share a common history, basically. And it's funny, like, why do we, it really made me question, why do we remain friends with these people who actually don't bring us anything but like pain or bother, or even like, but it's like, we shared so much, we need to stay together, like which is also very similar to, love relationships also, sadly, but truly, so that's also something we could, point out. So that's going to take me to my second point, like that's going to be linked more with morality. So love and friendship involve both a concern for the friend or the beloved, for her or his sake, and there is this feeling of commitment in both cases, which is also funny, that made me notice that we always speak about the fact that we need to be cared for, but we might actually need way more to care for somebody. Actually, the need to care for somebody might be actually stronger than the need to be taken care of. Yes, that was correct. Okay, good. So all that is involved in both types of relationship. Now, let's speak about certain philosophers and see if that can shed some light about this distinction. So, Plato, famous philosopher that you might have heard of, actually distinguished 3 types of love. So one type of love would be eros, which is like this kind of sexual love and that involves sexual attraction that we've been talking about, which, the word erotic comes from. Philia is a second type of love, which is, it's not obvious, but it can be easily translated as what we call friendship today. And agape, which is less famous, and I'm gonna get back on that in a second. So agape is this kind of like benevolent, unconditional love, kind of similar to like if you were Christian, the love that God would have for basically all human beings. So it's like not so much concerned about like intrinsic quality of the person, but more like just this like giving love, so to say, and kind of universal in a way, okay? Whereas for eros and philia, which again are similar in that aspect, they're supposed to focus on the objective properties of the beloved, of the friend. So kindness, beauty, listening abilities, whatever it is that you value in your friend or your beloved, okay? So friendship, just like erotic love, is a matter more of appraisal, really, right? So we care about our friends, our lovers, because we like certain features in their character. But that actually raises a couple of questions. First of all, I'm not so sure that these supposedly objective features we see in our friend or our beloved might very well be, I think they might be very well be coming from desires that we project onto the beloved or the friend. We expect certain things from our beloved or our friend, and so we project all these desires onto them, and we build an idea of who this friend or beloved is that might very well not correspond to reality. So in like the love domain, we can think about I think I mentioned that in another olio. Stendhal, I don't know if you know, like this theory of crystallization. He speaks about this like piece of this branch from a tree that went down to like some cave where there was salt, and so this branch is really like kind of ugly, but whatever, and just it stays there for quite a while, and when he comes back to pick it up, it actually is this beautiful like kind of crystalline, magnificent diamond, almost like around this beautiful branch, and he takes this metaphor to explain that when you love someone, and that could also apply to friendship, I think, when you love someone, you give them qualities you want to see in them. So they're not like inherent objectively to the person, but you might very well project them onto them. So that's one thing. The other problem that comes with defining friendship as a matter of appraisal of the objective quality of the friend is that it's too subjected to possible disappointment. What happens when your friends change? They don't have these features anymore. They don't listen as well as they used to. They're not beautiful as much as they used to. They're not funny as much as they used to. What? Then you just give them up? So that contradicts another very important feature of friendship, namely loyalty. So it doesn't work. You see, like all these features kind of sometimes contradict each other. And another problem also that comes with that, related to the one I just mentioned, is that if you're just looking for these very features in the friend, then anyone who would embody these features would become your friend. So if you're looking just like for kindness, let's say, you have your checklist of like the features that you want to see in a friend, you could very well say, well, as long as you match all the boxes, you're gonna become my friend. Not quite. I mean, I live with a lot of roommates who are like 12, and most of them are my friends, and I think that's why I value friendship also so much, because I decided to live despite being in love myself, I decided to live, among friends. But there is this person which really, like, we share the same interests, same intellectual and moral values, and I can't smell her. And I don't know why. And it's a problem. Like, ethically, it actually makes me, ask, I cannot become a friend, really. So it's not like, again, your friend cannot just be a collection of the feature you want to see. There is something else, maybe involved with this intimacy we spoke about a minute ago. So caring about a friend, more than a matter of appraisal of inherent qualities, could very well be a matter of giving value, really, to your beloved or your friend. More in the sense of, as I spoke about a minute ago, of agape. Alors, not that you would be God just loving anyone indifferently with benevolence and unconditionally. It's not like that, but like, it has to do really being friend with someone, has to do not with like blindly projecting our desires onto this person, but in caring unconditionally about a friend just for who she is or who he is. And that takes me to a very important feature in friendship, namely like this idea of selfless devotion that we actually have, towards our friends. So that's another question I have for you guys now, which is more focused on like the moral aspect of friendship. So what exactly does friendship have to do with our moral life? And my question for you now, guys, that I want you to discuss again, is the following. Do you think that friendship really requires a sense of selflessness? A lot of people, and namely a lot of philosophers with their very demanding conception of friendship or definition of friendship, actually regard selflessness and pure devotion, loyalty to your friend, as like one of the main characteristic of true friendship, right? Now I'm asking you, do you think selflessness is really like not only like an ideal, just, a requirement for friendship? What do you think about that? I'll give you a few minutes to think about that with somebody next to you. All right, guys. So again, the question was, to what extent does friendship requires selflessness? Is it an utopia? Is it like an ideal definition of friendship or not? Anyone on that? Yeah, go ahead. 2.28%? What do you mean?
No. I think it does require an amount of selflessness, because you can't always expect your friends to have reciprocity for how you're expressing friendship. You have to understand that they're going to respond on their own time schedule and their own.
Okay, so you need at least to take into consideration where they're coming from and all that, and that's a form of selflessness, basically, like just to make sure that you put yourself into their shoes to a certain extent, identify with them enough to be concerned about how they perceive things. Yes?
I think it's interesting because we were talking about from the reverse angle that there's this reciprocity that's sort of this basic foundational aspect of civilization, that like in a community you give something freely expecting that someone will do something for you at a certain point. So they're always going to do something for you in the future. So is it truly selfless is the question.
In anthropology, so this is a very good remark indeed. So Lévi-Strauss pointed that out in anthropology, the fact that it's always when you give something, you're always implicitly, even if it's not like clearly stated, you're always implicitly waiting for something in return. And indeed, a lot of people have pointed that out, about friendship. So even if some beautiful definitions might sound like this one, which I found from Gustave Thibon, a philosopher that nobody knows, but it's actually a good one. He said, the true friend is not the one who knows how to feel pity for your sufferings. It is the one who knows how to look at our happiness without envy. Good luck with that. Because let's be honest for a second, and I know it's hard because we kind of have this like beautiful bubbly definition of friendship. We just like it's pink and all. It's beautiful. Not pink. I don't know. That's more love. But you know what I'm saying? It's just like we have a preconception of friendship as if it was an obvious thing. But at the end of the day, this selflessness and integrity are not easy to have. So when you think about people like Aristotle, which is a philosopher that's way more famous, he says that most of our relationships are actually based on pleasure or interest, which is pretty true. And he defines 3 types of friendship this time. So Plato defines 3 types of love. Friendship was one. But Aristotle actually goes deeper into the topic of friendship and says there is 3 types of friendship and only one is really genuine. So the 2 types that are not really genuine are pleasant friendship and useful friendship. So I may love my friend because of the pleasure I get out of him or her, because of the ways in which she or he is useful to me. But I may also love my friend because I find her or him to have an objectively virtuous character. So that would be the virtuous friendship, the 3rd type of friendship he's speaking about, that for him is the only genuine form of friendship. And this friendship requires to be extremely virtuous, namely to be totally selfless in that sense. Because the 2 other type of friendships, namely like the useful one, the pleasant one, really they stop whenever the interests stop, whenever the pleasure stop. Utility and pleasure can be part of a genuine friendship. They can definitely, come along with a genuine friendship, but they're not going to be at the root of it. They're not going to be defining the core of it, not the foundation of it. So pleasure and utility type of friendships are at best, I would say, deficient modes of friendship. And Aristotle points out, which is kind of interesting and can be interpreted in many ways, that my friend is kind of an alter ego, he says, okay, that I love because he mirrors the morality I see in myself. And I was like, wait a minute. So basically, it's still about myself. So it's like virtuous what? It's just still, it's selfish. It's not, it's like, it's narcissistic even. It's like it shows me that I'm a virtuous person. It reflects my virtuous, character onto somebody else, and we just share and praise ourselves for being so virtuous together. Great. Okay, so it's still selfish in a way. So what I'm trying to see here is that actually selflessness might be a little utopian, and we are fundamentally self-centered or seeking, our own interest in any relationship that we have. And that might be difficult to acknowledge, but this is true. And here you have like a philosopher or a moralist that I love very much called Ruche Foucault, very caustic guy. It's pretty hard to read him. You're like, it's so true, but that's kind of sad. And he points out this very thing, that we're always expecting something in return, and that reciprocity that we spoke about, like friendship, like, that I said that it was an important, feature of friendship, maybe like the most characteristic feature of friendship, is also about favors and help given, expecting to be returned. And if not, maybe it's not about like, oh, I did you a favor, you're going to give me a favor back. But the gratitude, the pleasure that we actually get at being, thanked, for instance, or stuff like this. And we get a lot of pleasure at that. So it's still selfish in a way. The love of our friends also promotes self-esteem very often. We judge the merit of our friends based on how they support us, how they love us, how they flatter us. The more a friend loves you, the more you're going to love them, just because it actually pleases you. And also, he says that, and that I think it's interesting, he says that it's impossible not to compare ourselves with our friend in a competitive way. He says we always love the ones who admire us, but it's difficult to love the ones we admire. It's difficult to love the ones we value more than ourselves. So there is also like a competition going on. And I know it's sad to acknowledge, no, that's not true. But I mean, sometimes you get that feeling, I don't know, like for instance, in situations where a friend of yours, is going to go through a great period of their lives, and it so happens that you're not in such a great period of your life, and there is something a bit annoying, about it. Let's be honest, like it's not like, it's very hard to just be happy for your friend. It takes quite a bit of, a bit of strength, a bit of actually feeling of security also that some people don't have. Also, there is another concept that, Ruche Foucault didn't bring out, but still I think it's relevant in this context. it's the concept of Schadenfreude. I don't know if you know this word. It's oh, okay, great. Because it's, you know, it's so German word which is difficult to translate, but it's like Freude means joy in German, and Schaden means like, Schade means like, oh, too bad. So Schaden is like a, you know, kind of a bad thing that happens, and it's like this pleasure you take at seeing people doing less well than you do, basically, which is, you know, I know it's not very, you know, it's not very nice to think of yourself that way, but it's kind of true. We compare ourselves to our friends and feel better about our own situation by contrast. We even feel like this kind of guilty joy in the despair of our friends sometimes, because guess what? We also get the credit for being here and give them a nice empathetic shoulder. Because there is a lot of pleasure in taking like the tenderness you show to your friend, and then like this, you know, shiny eyes, tearful eyes of gratitude you see is actually extremely, you know, self-validating also. So that's what he's trying to promote as well. So to try to get out of this, you know, kind of sad aspect, we can say that actually what I like about Epicurus and La Rochefoucauld, which are kind of defend the same thing here, they try to really demystify or debunk like an utopian you know, definition of friendship that would actually, you know, take away the selfish or, you know, self-centered part. And they're very much into like this philosophy of hedonism I was mentioning, you know, earlier, namely that pleasure is the ultimate aim of existence, and so egoist interest is the only principle of conduct, really. But now we can have both, really, of altruism and egoism, if we consider that we take more pleasure to actually love the other than to love ourselves. So I think they're compatible in a certain way. We can find a middle ground, or not a middle ground, really a compatibility, where you take pleasure at loving the other more than you love yourself to a certain extent, if that's possible. So it's not like a, you know, a dead end. You can actually come over this kind of dichotomy where self-love is not so much crashed or like forgotten, but just adjusted in a way. So now we have like other moral questions, you know, that raise about friendship. So one of the questions I thought about is like, you know, this kind of funny moral dilemmas that philosophers love usually when like you're like, what should I do? When you have like, let's say, for instance, you know, you have your friend and the loyalty you owe to your friend, but also he puts you in this difficult situation. Like, let's say, you know, friend comes to you and is like, can you pee, you know, for me for this drug test because I'm never gonna pass, you know, you're like, dude, I don't, you know, it's sometimes you're put into these situations with friends where you have to actually determine what's the right, you know, what's the right thing to do. So friends have this like kind of moral preference that is kind of interesting. We have obligations to aid and support our friends that go well beyond those, you know, we have to help strangers. Now the question is, can our obligations to our friends sometimes like trump our moral duties, or must we always subordinate our personal relationships to morality in order to be, you know, properly impartial, basically? So our loyalty can be challenged. And if I need to lie or hide the truth to protect a friend who's done something wrong, you know, it puts me in a difficult situation. And this lie can be like to other society in general, but also to the friend himself, about how we feel about certain thing that this friend has done, about his or her wrongdoings. Now my question is, and that takes me really to my main point here, is like, to what extent can we allow ourselves to lie to our friends? And by lying here, I'm speaking also lying by omission, namely not tell the truth. When you think about it in philosophy, you know, you find a lot of situations where lying can be acceptable. And one of them has to do very often with like politeness, right? It's not really a type of lie, but it's like, you know, when your friend asks you something, you know, that they seem to be expecting kind of an honest answer from you, you very often like embellish reality in order to please them, right? And so that's something about friendship that I'm going to be questioning right now. And so I want to argue that friendship is absolutely essential to actually shape our moral character in regards to this demand of sincerity. So on the one hand, We need a friend in order to know who we are. And not only who we are, but this mirror thing, right? But also who we could be and how we can get better. So there is a mimetism at play within friendship. You know, we imitate the behavior of our friends. You know, let's say, for instance, we allow our friends' interest to shape your own. For instance, you know, a friend is like, oh, I'm going to go to the ballet. You're like, oh, opera. Great. You let that shape you. You know, we're like, why not? Let me try that. And you might grow a new interest. Why not? And I think that goes also not only for interest, but also for moral values. In the vulnerability I show to my friends, I let them interpret who I am. And to be interpreted by my friends is to allow the understanding of myself, of my strengths, but also of my weaknesses, to be assessed and shaped by their interpretation. So we develop, thanks to friendship, a new understanding of ourselves and potentially change ourselves in response to this interpretation that they give us. So the mirror thing here, we could be recycling the theory of the mirror that I was pointing out with Aristotle and say that the friend is a mirror, yes, but not in the sense that the friend is my alter ego, similar to me and reflecting my own virtues, but more in the sense that he gives me the mirror I need to be able to critically reflect on the weaknesses of my character. And because friends are different also, and that takes me back to one of the features I mentioned, like the similarity of interest, I think also we need friends that are very different from us. And because of this difference, we can give each other unexpected perspectives on the value of certain decisions, for instance. Like friends play this active role in transforming basically each other's evaluative outlook onto certain things. And it's not only a fact, we do not only accept our friend advice, but we ought to accept direction and interpretation, as I was saying, from our friends, but also give the same to them, which is, I would say, the hardest part. Because it's easier to say, yeah, I'm gonna let my friends, shape me, tell me what, how I could get better and all that. But then in return, it's always about reciprocity. We also need to be sincere with our friends. And it sounds lame, but it's actually a very difficult thing to do. And when you think about your really best friends or the friends maybe who mark you the most, it's actually the friends who were able to tell you, dude, you got to stop this. It's the friends who are able to say, you know what, I'm gonna put in jeopardy my very friendship with you by telling you for your own sake what you need to hear, even if you don't want to hear it, and even if I risk the very existence of my friendship with you. These are the friendships that really matter. So, basically, true friendship, in that sense, only exists if it is always ready to take the risk of putting its very existence in danger. And that's something that Cicero have been pointing out, for instance. He says friendship is only truth and sincerity. So we have to address our friends' flaws, even when they don't affect us, because often, whenever it affects us, we're going to point out the flaws because, it's going to, it affects us, so it's problematic. But even when it doesn't, and that's where selflessness comes, to a certain extent, into the picture, I would say. And Ruche Foucault, again, would say that. It says that it is one of the most difficult tasks of a friend, therefore one of the most characteristic of a true friendship, to not only show ourselves naked to our friends, by, allowing them to see our vulnerability, and accept their criticism, but also to give them our honest advice and opinion about them. It's actually a very courageous and delicate, obviously, act. It requires a lot of effort, and it's so much easier to just be, the nice friend, the flattering friend, the loving friend. And that takes me back to maybe this slight difference between maybe don't take it the wrong way, but the American feel I have about friendship, since I live in this country for now almost 10 years, and the way I define or used to define friendship in France, where you have this kind of blunt honesty that can sometimes hurt, that I don't find very often here. There is this very tyranny of joy and optimism and be positive type of thing that affects the way we perceive friendship, I think, in this country, and kind of shapes it in a way where you can't afford to be honest to your friend if you want to keep their friendship, really. And I think that's a very wrong misconception of what friendship maybe not is, but ought to be. So I'm going to stop here because that's a lot of things, and I just want your feedback on that if you have any questions. I also wanted to, further debate on the exclusivity aspect of friendship, and maybe speak about the idea that nowadays living in this society of social media and all that some people actually meet on the internet, make friends via the internet, and we speak about the word friend, for Facebook and all that. And obviously that was kind of a commercial, little trick used by these big companies to actually build this feel of bonding and trusting. But then it actually became, a concept, and maybe that use of the word friend in that conception also biased or reshaped the definition we have of friendship, and gave it more of a vague, definition where we don't know anymore what's really the difference between, a loving acquaintance and an actual true friendship. So I would love to have your feedback on that. Thank you very much for your attention tonight. Anyone has questions or remarks? That would be very helpful. Yes. Maybe I'm going to give you the...
Yeah, I think, so I work as a therapist, and so in my professional life and in my personal life, what I've noticed has been one of the greatest testimonies of any relationship is how two individuals walk through conflict together, and how you both allow space and bear witness to each other being human and accept that. And I think it kind of spoke to that last ending remark that you said about true selflessness in a relationship is when you're willing to jeopardize the friendship itself for the care of the other person.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Yes? Oh, perfect.
First of all, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for this lecture. And I was thinking about an experience that I believe to be true, and through talking to my friends, I think it's true for my friends. So I don't know if it's true for everyone, but I was wondering why friend breakups are often feel a lot worse than romantic breakups. I don't know if it's true for everyone. I only know it for my friends. But.
As a matter of fact, I never went through this experience, so I wouldn't know. But I'm sure it would. How do you say when you bury someone? Grief. Voilà. I'm sure it. I'm sorry. It's I'm sure it feels. Yeah, kind of a grieving thing. It's part of you that goes. I can imagine. But anyone maybe wants to say a few words about, because I didn't personally go through this experience. Yes.
For myself, when it happens, I think it has a lot to do with expectations. Whenever you enter a romantic relationship, there's always this idea that this might end. So that when it does end, even though it's sad,
you're prepared.
You're sort of prepared for it. But no one enters a friendship expecting it to end. So that when it does end, even if it's a terrible, toxic relationship, you still long for it because in your mind it was going to be with you forever.
Yeah, you're not psychologically prepared for the death of a friendship, but more to this is true. But also, why? What would be the reason why a friendship would break down? Then you want to add something?
That's my question.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's because I'm curious about what happens when a friendship just doesn't work anymore. Maybe there are some other features that I didn't point out that you might have in mind. By adopting, instead of saying what are the features of friendship, let's try to see what are the features that can make a friendship fall. So go ahead, Tiffany, maybe.
Well, I think there's a notion of a transcendent friendship base, and then what's actually going on. Like you're saying, there's so many friends that we have that we don't even know why, and it's in the name of friendship. It's the obligation of the friend. And that was kind of my question, how far does loyalty go?
Yeah, exactly. So what would be the moment where because I don't know, like, how do you make up back with a friend? Like, you just like, I don't know how that works, really. It never happened to me again. So if like that would be actually a good light to shed. I don't know, guys. You pick and choose who's gonna talk.
I never experienced this before, but my guess is like friendship could end when both of you fall in love with the same person. Then it could end.
When they're in love with the same person. Okay, definitely. Yeah. Well, that would like imply like a third party, right? But like I'm sure that sometimes they just end without that, like just like expectations that are not met anymore, etc. But like to what extent? Maybe the friendships who actually can break up were not friendships in the first place. Doesn't it like shed a retrospective light onto the friendship before and say maybe it was not a friendship after all, you know?
So, hi, I have the microphone. Hi. So I tend to disagree. I'm currently fighting with by fighting, I mean not speaking to my best friend of 20 years. We grew up in the same neighborhood. We are both educated, have like chosen to be part of each other's lives. And it actually ended because I was brave enough to be honest with her and put the friendship at risk, and she couldn't receive the truth. So that is the answer, that sometimes you put a friendship at risk by being honest, and sometimes that's not received. I'm confident that we will eventually resolve this, but I'm also sitting here lacking a best friend in this moment, you know? So that's how sometimes you put yourself out on that ledge and you're honest, and maybe you don't articulate well or whatever it is, but it's not always received, regardless of how much time is invested in a friendship.
Regardless of how much time, regardless how,
or
you
how
know,
much
what rhetorics also you use in order to say that truth. And that would be a whole other topic, like the diplomacy that really needs to be at play when we tell, you know, this truth that are always need to be formulated as potential truth. You know, you always have to have like this kind of humbled position saying, maybe, you know, with all these modal verbs, you know, might, you know, kind of thing. You know, that's also, you know, maybe it's in the way we phrase also these truth that, you know, the problem lies as well. Somebody else? Wherever you want.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Have a comment. What about what makes the person who would be your friend incompatible in friendship with you? So, and I also think about what's most important to you, what you would value most. So if to go to your point, if you wanted to be truthful to your friend, right? That's what's going to make you happy because you're living in what you believe to be right, and that goes against what your friend would believe in. So I don't know if there's a disconnect there that has led to this dissolution, or.
It's we can hear what you say.
If you can perceive someone making a great decision, making a decision that's not great for them, and you're honest about that, and they don't receive it, you know what I mean?
Because
I
they
don't
don't receive it because they find it presumptuous also.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, like recently I had a friend of a friend who just who like was probably with the wrong person, and you know he wouldn't hear what the friends, you know, had to say about that, you know. And it's funny how you need to really like prepare the terrain, so to say, and to plant these seeds, you know, with time, because you're gonna, you know, ego is always involved, you know, in the picture. So you really need to find, that would be also a very interesting, like almost, you know, I don't know, skills to work on, like really how to talk to our friends, because we assume with friendship we can say everything. We can talk the way we want, you know, and no, maybe there is actually a certain delicacy that needs to be, you know, involved in the way we talk to our friends to allow them to see, you know, this truth actually. Yeah, some other, yeah, if you scream.
I was just thinking about what you were saying, that we need friends in order to know ourselves, which made me think that so much of friendship has to do with like feeling seen, or liking the person, liking the way that you feel like you're being seen. And so if you stop liking the person that you see reflected in that other person, or you no longer feel seen by that other person, and or you're not willing to put the work in to see that other, like everyone has to see each other. So if people are no longer willing to put the work in to see each other because they don't like what's being reflected back at them, I think that's when friendship ends.
and that's where also friendship maybe was not friendship.
But I think at one point you might have seen that other person. You might have really been seeing each other. People change, right? So like at some point you become uninterested in seeing that person, or you no longer like the way that they see you because you've changed. Like I don't necessarily agree that a friendship that ends was never a friendship. I don't think.
Okay.
Next.
Okay, just one little point. I think you're saying two things. Yeah, right. Not only the and or type of thing, but like. You say like there is, I think it's a misconception to be friends with someone just because they appreciate who you are. So I hope that's a point I made, yeah.
It could be, so it probably wasn't a friendship you were only friends with them because you liked what you were seeing, but it was a friend, if the person is actually seeing you,
yeah. Yeah. No, it's but yeah, this is definitely, two things, but I think somebody,
Yeah. I actually subscribe to Aristotle's classification of friendship, and I think the one thing that really...
So utility, just for everyone, utility, pleasure, and then virtuous friendship.
Virtuous friendship, and I think the
virtuous friendship
right?
being the genuine one, yes.
Right, virtuous and veritas, that's truth. And I think the main thing, it's not selflessness that distinguishes them, it's honesty, it's the truth, it's the transparency between those friends. And I think when you are selfless in that way, you lose that sense of self, you become a collective self with that person. And so when that breakup happens, it hurts because you lose a part of yourself, which wouldn't necessarily happen with a romantic relationship. So I think that's how I'm connecting it in my head.
It's funny. I think of friendship just as much. Again, another feature that I think friendship and love, if not share, but maybe should share, is the aspect that it's not so much like this, famous image of like a fusion or a blending between two individuals forming one or something, which is the very demanding definition that Montaigne gives of friendship. He was very that's probably like the most famous friendship history in the history of philosophy. Montaigne and La Boétie were great friends, and Montaigne actually says that you can only have one friend. And the way he describes friendship with this guy is extremely exclusive, demanding, and all that. So it's very... And they form basically a union. I think you should maybe see friendship and love relationship more as a federation kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like, we're our own states. We might have some things in common, but it's like, and I think there is also a precaution to be taken whenever you enter a relationship, being, a relationship of love or a relationship of friendship. There is also a self-protection that needs to be involved, maybe to a certain extent.
But you do share the same plane of truth. Sorry.
Yes.
So I think that's the transparency, right? In order to be able to really see them, as she mentioned, you have to be transparent. Like the friendships that I ended, or when it ended, it was because someone was hiding something. Someone wasn't really saying what they wanted to say, and maybe they were jealous. Maybe they couldn't be as selfless as they thought they should be, but they weren't coming clean about it, and it came out in weird ways. So
sincerity is very often at play when friendship breaks.
Right.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
of course, preserve your own self, but be selfless in the way that you share that same environment of truth.
Okay, I see. Yes?
To follow up on that, it seems tonight that we're talking about friendship as though it's friendship of equals.
Yes.
And so my question to you and to the group is, can we think about a friendship where there's not a presumption of equality?
What do you have in mind? Give me an example.
So I think, and I'm not an expert on Confucian thought.
Nobody's an expert here.
I think there's a conception of an older friend, younger friend, and so the expectations in that friendship are different, but they're not necessarily reciprocal or equal. Well, they're not necessarily equal, but they may be reciprocal.
To be honest with you, I wouldn't share the view that an age difference would actually bring.
I'm not saying that's what I'm asking about. I'm just.
But I'm trying to see precisely, to have in mind what would be a friendship between. What do you mean by two unequal individuals? Unequal in terms of the social background they come from, for instance, or you know what I'm saying? And that goes back to the difference. I think, when I say that you need a certain amount of maybe you need a certain, similarities in order to actually be willing to share stuff together, right? Or similarities of character, or similarities of interest. This is true. Similarities of values, even if you can be friends with people who don't have the same political ideas at all, for instance. Friends who don't have the same tastes at all, for instance. And so, every time you see that actually difference can be a great thing in order it enrich yourself way more than being basically imprisoned into this echo chamber where your friends just reflect who you are already, basically. And so I would promote actually an inequality in that sense, or a difference, I would call that a difference, into between the two friends in order to enrich them more, each of them. I think I see two hands over there.
Sorry.
Two hands over there, though.
I think you're talking more about someone giving more and someone taking more in a relationship. Is that what you meant?
Ah.
I'm just raising the question that if we think of it as a tit for tat equal, we get kind of trapped in the mirror. Mm-hmm. And if we think of it as having different valences, and that let's say it, power shifts in friendships. And it shifts in friendships over time, but it still may be authentic, but it may not be equal.
Mm. So power, that's your point. That's because I think that's also how I would have interpreted it. It's not reciprocal, maybe after all. One friend might love the other more, expect more from the other, but that goes back to this idea of power. But then I would say... Yeah. No. It's part of maybe moments during the history of the friendship, for sure. Yeah.
Can I say something to that? So one example that I was thinking of when you were talking about it was Plato's example of, for example, in Symposium, where there was the older man would take a younger man under his wing, and it was platonic friendship. Occasionally it was sexual, but let's keep that to the side for the moment. But yeah, that was a relationship of inequality where it was both people were getting different things out of the relationship.
But there was a reciprocity. They just didn't give the same thing to each other, but one was compensating the other in a way. And yeah, though even if in the Symposium he calls that friendship, that might be a misconception of the world, at least a conception of the world that, the definition has shifted through time as well, and I'm not sure we would see that as friendship today. And I would actually hope we wouldn't. Because there is definitely this power dynamics that you're mentioning, and I'm not sure that allows this type of relationship to qualify as a friendship. But that's just me. Yes.
So I was just wondering, this core of friendship being, a willingness to tell a hard truth at the risk of the friendship, how universal you view that as being. I feel like we're just, when we've had this discussion, it's within this cultural context of French and American friendships and Greek philosophers, and I'm just curious if you've done, I think it's very easy for us to think that our mode of relating to people is universal, when a lot of times it's less so. And I'm just curious if you've done research into cultural contexts that are more different and more unlike our own. It kind of builds off the idea of Confucius, Chinese, or whatever. Just if you think that it's a universal core of friendship, or if that's something that's more relative to the cultural context in which the friendship is happening.
I think so I've done a bit of research, but I'm no anthropologist of friendship, which would be a very interesting topic to explore, to be honest with you. But it's in most, so I looked at Indian culture, notably, to get outside of mainly the Western world and Greeks and you still have this idea of giving, which always sounds extremely altruistic, but the giving is always an investment on the long term, and there is this bond is a type of contract in a way where both parties are committed to help each other, and if one fails, the friendship fails as well. So in that sense, you have this utopia of selflessness, I would say, or selfless being an utopia in most conceptions of friendship, definitely. Now, the aspect of sincerity, I'm not sure. is that something, first of all, as I was telling you, I'm not sure we live in a, we might say that sincerity and transparency are keys in theory, but that when we try to put them in practice, that's another question, and actually, some people might suffer from that. So it's not specific, in practice, it's not a specific feature of the way we live friendship, we practice friendship. It might be a specific feature of how we want theoretically to think of friendship, but in practice it's not. So I don't know about other cultures, how they see this sincerity component. If French are just here to support you, no matter what you do, and to be like this positive energy that is always going to be like flattering and self-validating and all that, or if sincerity is also part of the requirements for friendship. I'm not sure. Yes?
Hi.
Oh, one last question.
Hello. I just had one comment on sort of where you left off with the lecture of this idea of is it only really like a true friendship if you're pushing each other and kind of calling each other out when you need to and wanting each other to be better. And I don't disagree with it as like this virtual ideal. I'm just kind of thinking through the implications, and I'm wondering if that makes friendship something more of a means than an end in itself, to like living a virtuous life. And to me, that is a little problematic. But I don't disagree with the like what it's trying to do. But I feel like in a lot of relationships, whether it's love or friendship or whatever, like the relationship itself is an end and it's worth something. So I just find it kind of hard to marry the two ideas.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, it's not only about defining friendship, but it's also about defining the functions of friendship. And if I speak about functions of friendship, I'm seeing friendship as a means indeed in that sense, and not only a relationship that's valued for the sake of it, for the pure sake of itself. And I think, again, that goes back to this idea of selflessness being impossible to achieve. So if selflessness is not going to be, realistic, so to say, then what should we be looking at or for when we consider friendship, basically? And I would say one of the most valuable or honorable functions that friendship can bring as a means is to actually enrich us and make us a better person by allowing ourselves to be more transparent to our friends, but also by forcing ourselves to train on that sincerity onto others in a very, again, diplomatic and delicate way that is actually extremely interesting and dangerous. And that, I think, is just like this dialectic between like, you're a good friend when you're ready to actually kill your friendship for the sake of friendship. So it remains an end and a means at the same time in that context, you see? Well, thank you very much. I think we need to stop. Have a beer. Enjoy. Thank you very much, guys.